Hey, deserving listeners, Love is Blind Season 5. Let's watch. My name is Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and professor. I want to remind everyone not to use YouTube as a replacement for therapy. If you need a therapist, get one. You really deserve it. Let's watch.
Sometimes it was selfish, but...
You've done things. Have you ever cheated in a relationship?
Once.
You can be honest. Tell me about it.
It was in the relationship where I was just not sexually satisfied for 2.5 years.
When was this?
2 years ago.
Okay, so Uche and Aaliyah are getting along really well and have basically said, you are the one for me, to each other. And they talked about deal breakers, and they both identified that being dishonest is their deal breaker, which I thought was a possible indication of them having been cheated on in the past and really want honesty. Now, it's normal to want honesty, and honesty could indicate a lot of things, right? Like honest about emotions or honest about your future plans or whatever, but I was just wondering about that. And then he asks her, well, have you been dishonest? And she says, yes. And, and it's normal to have a history of at least some moments of dishonesty in the past, depending on what you mean by that. And then she reveals that a couple years ago, she cheated. We don't know to what extent, but she admits that she cheated on her past partner because she wasn't sexually satisfied. She had a face. She's like, for 2.5 years. And I didn't know what that meant, and maybe we'll find out. But there's two different versions of this. One is where she will say, and I feel really bad about what I did. There's so many other things I should have done. I should have broken up with him. I should have communicated more, because, sexual dissatisfaction can be rough, but that doesn't justify you deceiving and harming another human being that you're in a relationship with, the person you presumably love and you say that you love and you are presumably committed to, right? Just break up or figure out another way. Don't cheat. So I would hope that she would say something like, I feel really bad about it, and I should have broken up about it. I should have broken up with him instead of doing that. I was confused and struggling, and I've learned a lot about myself. I have this tendency sometimes to submerge my feelings, and that's what was happening then. And then I just was in denial about my dissatisfaction, and then I had a couple drinks one night with a former partner, and we got together, and then I realized, what am I doing? That's one story. The other story, and we've seen it, they've had these kind of conversations on Love is Blind, or another story is, well, yeah, I was sexually dissatisfied, and I kept trying to change our sexual life, and he just kept refusing. And so, one night I got drunk and I had sex with someone, and, it just really taught me that I deserved better. And so that's when I broke up with them. That's a different narrative, right? And it shows a different moral compass, and it shows a different set of values, a different set of empathy for other people's feelings. I'm not saying that people don't make mistakes, and they do, but there's a way of how you narrative. It also shows that you have a way of centering the story around yourself instead of the other person. Now, there's a lot of different stories that she might say, but we haven't heard it yet. You can talk a good game around honesty, but how do you actually live your life is a completely different thing, potentially.
Oh boy, you're a recent cheater.
Not like that, Uche. Don't say that.
Oh.
Don't say it like that, because...
It's the truth, isn't it?
I mean, it is, but it's just, look, I have to say, that relationship, I really, really tried, and I did everything.
It's almost exactly what I was worried about. Oh, no. I think we have a problem in our culture. I'm not old man shakes fist at young people, but this has always been around, even when I was younger. And we just have this way of framing these things to ourselves and to our friends. Say she goes through this experience. I don't know the story, but she breaks up. She tells that she breaks up to her friends and family, and I would be surprised if any of her friends and family were to say something like, I'm glad you got out of the relationship. I'm so sorry that happened. It sounds like it was kind of rough. And what do you think about the fact that you cheated? Like, what have you learned from that? Now, I'm not saying friends and family are supposed to do that sort of thing, but I don't imagine that happening very often. I see therapists that don't do this sort of thing, and it really bothers me. Let me just give a different scenario. A client comes into a therapist. So say a client comes into me and says, "Oh yeah, you know what?" Say it's a guy, heterosexual guy, and he's like, "Yeah, in my past relationship, we fought a lot, and sometimes she would just completely fly off the handle at me. She'd just start calling me names, and sometimes I just couldn't take it anymore, and so I hit her, I pushed her. It's not great, but she was yelling at me." Okay, so as a therapist, as a friend, as a family member, I would say, "Okay, I'm sorry she was yelling at you, but you can't hit her." That's not. If you were defending yourself, you can defend yourself, but it doesn't sound like that. It doesn't sound like you were defending. It sounds like you did a harmful thing, and I get the motivation, I guess. You're telling a story as to what motivated you, but it doesn't justify what you did. My point is that it's a frustration of mine that I don't know what to do about, other than to say, in kindergarten, we learned not to lie and not to harm other people. And if you can do something to prevent harm to another person, then you should probably do it. And all you have to do is break up with the person. And usually cheating doesn't just happen. It's something that builds. All you got to do is break up. It is hard to break up, but it's not impossible, right? I don't know what her narrative is, and I don't know her journey, and I don't know the circumstance of her past relationship. I'm not judging her, and so if I were in his shoes, or if I was his friend or therapist, I would say to him, it is interesting. It's more interesting, her narrative about it right now, and maybe she'll make up for it in a second. I've interrupted her, but it's not so much to me, if I were in his shoes, that she cheated. It's how what story she tells herself about the fact that she cheated. We are all narcissistic. We are all self-centered. And there's a lot of different definitions of narcissism in our field, but the one I'm using right now is we all prefer ourselves. When we see someone else that does something bad, like we see someone on the highway do something unsafe, we're like, that's an a-hole. But when we do it, we say, but there are reasons. I'm not an a-hole. There's reasons, there's circumstances as to why I did that, or I don't usually do that. We prefer ourselves. We're narcissistic. We're self-centered, and we make excuses for ourselves. We all do that. But when you are in relationships with other people, you have to have other mechanisms that will check yourself before you wreck yourself. That will check yourself when you are doing that. When we can all justify things to ourselves. We can all make excuses for ourselves, but you need to have a very robust editor or a very robust, bouncer at the door that says like, well, wait a second, denial and justification. I'm not going to let you into this club because in this instance, it's not justified. We need to actually look at what we did. I'm not going to beat myself up. I'm not going to say I'm a horrible human being, but I do have to look at, why did I make that choice? I could have done something different. What went on there? And that is the most important thing. People make mistakes, but if you're dating, because there will be times, not cheating necessarily, but if they end up in a relationship together, there will be times where both of them will have an opportunity and a need to look back at something that they did to each other, say a conflict or something, or disappointing each other in some way. And if someone doesn't have the ability to say, okay, what did I do there? And I want to say that I have reasons and I have justifications, but I have to be fair to the other person and think maybe I was wrong. If someone doesn't have that ability, then that's a red flag. That's one of the biggest red flags you could possibly imagine. You need to be self-reflecting, and there's not a lot of opportunity to find out that aspect until you get into it with someone, because anyone can say they're self-aware and they are willing to admit when they're wrong. It's another thing when you're actually in a relationship with them. So to me, the way she's talking about it is more concerning than the fact that she did it at all.
That relationship, I really, really tried, and I did everything that a person would do to try to fix the issues in the morally correct ways. I told him that I wasn't satisfied. I made suggestions, like I approached him in a loving way multiple times about our sex. I told him that.
Okay, this is all great so far, and I hope then what she gets to is, and then I made a terrible mistake that I regret to this day. So maybe she'll say so. And I could see her saying that.
I needed more, like multiple times.
Then why didn't you just break up with him?
I was afraid of being alone. What if I don't ever find anybody who will have the good things about him?
Okay, I don't know how to interpret that. On one hand, that's a good sign because she's saying, it depends on what she's saying. If she's saying, I have a problem with worrying about being alone and that eclipsed my moral values or my empathy such that I didn't break up with him and I should have. And I'm working on that. Because for Uche, he's thinking, unless I have evidence to think otherwise, you still have this problem. I mean, even if you've been in therapy straight for 2 years since you broke up with this person, that's not a lot of time to change. So you still have this tendency. So what happens with me? What happens? What are you going to do to me? Not necessarily cheating, but just all the things that you need to admit to yourself when you're in a relationship, so that you can take responsibility. Anyway, so is she saying that she has this problem and she recognizes it, and that's not anyone else's fault except for hers, of anxiety of being alone, and she was being selfish in that moment? Or is she saying, well, I was just worried about that, so it justifies what I did? Let's find out. I'm worried. And I'll say for the record that, I don't know why I said for the record, I'll say that this has happened when I've been watching these shows before. I think it even happened last season, right? And whenever I talk about this, there will be a lot of feelings. A lot of people will say, but I was in her shoes and I didn't cheat, but I understand why she cheated. Yeah, you can understand why someone did something, but that doesn't make it okay. Now, there are circumstances in relationships where I have said to people, even clients, that it wasn't immoral and harmful and lacking integrity to cheat. For example, if you are being abused and you're in a high control relationship and you want to break up and leave, but you can't because you're terrified, and you have some infidelity because you just want some buoy in the storm to keep you afloat for a while, or you're just looking for some love in the world or something. That is totally justified in my mind. Where's the line of abuse? But I don't know. With the stories that I've heard, make total sense to me. But this isn't that. This is her having conflict with her partner. Sounds like a number of issues. But as long as none of them were high control or intimidation, then she had the freedom to break up with him. She had the freedom to say, then I think I'm done because I have this urge to be with other people and I need to accelerate this. So I'm not saying that she should have stayed with him. And I'm not saying that she should have put up with it or something. What I'm saying is that when you have a choice to either cheat or break up and date, you should choose number two. And the reasons why people don't do it is because they go into denial and they have worries, which is totally understandable. But after the fact, 2 years later, you have the chance to look back and say, but that's not a justification. Those are my reasons, but that does not justify what I did. And I've learned from it. And if she said something like that, if I were in Uche's shoes, I would say, oh, well, that's more optimistic.
I don't ever find anybody who will have the good things about him. I don't know. I just.
It's not good.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, I imagine that 95% of people who have had this kind of event in their past will talk about it in this way or worse. So I'm not saying she's abnormal. I'm just saying that in my opinion, there's a very clear answer to this. And I guess if I were to really think about it, if you have most of the people anecdotally who have these attitudes, we have a problem because we don't talk about it enough. If you're a cheater, then you're a horrible person. It's very black and white, right? And so for people who end up cheating, they probably think, well, I'm not a horrible person, so it must have been okay. And there's no venue to talk about it, especially in the media. So she's not a horrible person. She's a very normal person for the perspective that she has. But I think it can, not only just with cheating, can lead to a lot of suffering for everyone involved, but all the other things, it's much more important because it's much more common to have conflict and make mistakes during that conflict with your partners, and then later on to narrativize it like I was fine and the other person was a jerk face. And everyone does that to each other. And so much pain and suffering happens from that. So I guess that's what I'm saying.
And you told your boyfriend this happened? Aaliyah?
Yeah.
Did you tell him about it?
No.
Well, he knows now, right? And to be clear, I have a pretty low bar about this because I see it's so consistently in one camp that if you just had a little, like if all she had to say is, well, but I feel really bad about what I did, that would be enough for me. Or, but it doesn't justify what I did. Just that one sentence. Maybe it's in there, but she didn't say it, and of course she would be motivated to say it because she clearly is sensing that he is concerned about that. Now, do I believe she is a bad person? No. I imagine, whenever I talk about this, I feel like it triggers people on some level, and especially people who have cheated or have been cheated on. It's a very fraught topic. I don't think there's anything wrong with him for being concerned about this. And I don't think there's anything wrong with her. If she were a friend of mine, I wouldn't judge her. I wouldn't think she was a bad person. This is a normal foible of humans. And really, it's for her benefit. It's for all of our benefit if we can love ourselves enough such that when we make mistakes, we give ourselves enough grace to say, I have that problem, but it doesn't mean I'm a bad person.
I didn't want to hurt him, and I knew I was wrong.
Do you think it was about not wanting to hurt him, though, or was it more about you?
I mean, it wasn't about me.
Yeah. She says, I knew it was wrong, and I didn't want to hurt him. Okay, so that's the first indication. So I wonder if there's a possibility that she does have the normal amount of differentiation and remorse, but the conversation is causing her to regress a bit somehow, because this is starting to look like a dad and a daughter having a conversation. Like she got in trouble for shoplifting or something, and he's scolding her. And so I wonder if she's regressing to that childish place where you just say what you need to say to get out of the conversation. But if she were freer to talk, and he's not intimidating her in any way, but the vibe or something, or the difficulty of it, there's a chance it's all in there. She doesn't come across like she's some sort of self-centered jerk face at all. There's a lot of roads to people who have a deficit in their ability to admit their own faults, to talk at length about how they have a personality trait that negatively affects other people. There's a lot of roads to that, and some of them are the psychopathic, narcissistic sort of road, but there are other roads. So if you've ever been in a relationship with someone like that, you know what that is like. And essentially she's presenting that to him right now. And that, that's a concern. Now, maybe they'll see through it, but it's hard to imagine. It's so interesting how they went from, yes, we are together and we're going to spend the rest of our lives together, to now we might be looking at something else. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. So I don't know about you, but when I go to bed at night, if I'm stressed out about something, then my mind will race with anxiety and I won't be able to sleep. For me, this is an indication that my mind is trying to work something out, either trying to solve a problem or process my feelings about something. And this is an indication I probably should talk about it with someone who cares. And of course, therapy can help with this. It could be argued that therapy has always been and always will be a place for us to express these thoughts that are plaguing us. It's a place to be heard, and it's a place for us to hear ourselves as we talk things out loud. Well, one option worth trying is BetterHelp. If you're thinking of starting therapy, it's worth giving a try. It's entirely online, it's designed to be convenient and suited to your schedule, and also you can switch therapists at any time at no additional charge. So get a break from your thoughts with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/Kirk today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Kirk.
You don't feel embarrassed or ashamed of what you did?
I dealt with that guilt for a long time.
And if you actually told him about it, you would have had to confront that embarrassment and guilt, and you would have felt even worse.
Okay, so she's saying she was dealing with the guilt for a very, very long time. Okay, that's the first thing that I've heard that gives some kind of something to hold on to. If I were a birdie on her shoulder, I would say, lay into that more. Really elaborate on that. When she says, I don't feel guilty anymore, or something like that, it's possible what she means is, I'm not beating myself up about it anymore because I've already beat myself up about it enough.
So you said it's not about hurting him, but really, it might have been about you, right?
I mean, what he's trying to say, I think, is you are saying you didn't tell him because you were trying to save his feelings, because you felt bad for him, you didn't want to hurt him. But is that really fair to him, especially now that you're talking about it on international television? But also, is it possible that it was more about that you didn't want to feel the guilt of having to admit it? That's why you didn't tell him. Now, I will say that there's a lot of debate as to whether or not it's even the best thing to tell. Say, for instance, she was very dissatisfied and then she cheats, and then the next day she wakes up and she's like, oh, what do I do? And she says, I'm going to break up. So she, thinks about it for a couple of days and then breaks up with her partner. And she never tells him about the infidelity. Is that okay? Is it fair? Is it moral? It kind of depends, because the end result, the outcome is the same. She's still dumping him, right? And is it important that he knows? Because he doesn't need to know, right? But it is the truth that it happened. And there's a possibility that he could be worse off if you tell him, because it's your burden to bear. It's hard to know. And the catch-22 is, the only way to know is to ask the person, because everyone's different about this. You can't go to him and say, so hypothetically, if I cheated on you, would you want me to tell you now that I'm breaking up with you, or would you rather have me not? You can't do that. So it's almost like we should all have like a statement that we establish up front, that if this happens, don't tell me, or if this happens, tell me, or in these circumstances, tell me, but in these ones, don't bother. It's just going to plague me too much.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. I really hated myself for doing that, but can't take it back.
So that could be another problem here. Another part of the issue is self-hatred. Who knows? But this going too far with it, right? And then avoiding that, right? And maybe even confusing self-reflection and taking responsibility with self-hatred, right? If you go a little bit into your flaws, but then that causes a downward spiral and you hate yourself and you beat yourself up for years, then you have a pretty good reason to just avoid talking about it at all, and to avoid thinking that you did anything wrong, or focusing on that. It's kind of looking like that. Now, that doesn't change the overall picture that I've been talking about, because you're still responsible to work on that so that you don't end up harming other people, right? You have a lot of the issues that cause us to hurt other people is we have been hurt. Hurt people, right? And we are those hurt people. Hurt people who hurt people are not other people. It's all of us. I have been hurt and I have hurt. You have as well. So we are all responsible for doing what we can within reason to address that as best we can. It might take a long time, but we're on the road, right? And if we do nothing, then we will continue to do that throughout our life, right? So we made a mistake, and part of the mistake was not admitting it to ourselves or not wanting to talk about it with other people. and not wanting to admit it and to justify it, because otherwise I will hate myself. So we can have sympathy for her if she does have that tendency based on trauma that she's been through. And we say, well, you shouldn't have to hate yourself. No, yeah. And if you have to avoid thinking about it, then temporarily maybe do that. But long term, so that you can not do this sort of thing again for your own sake and also for your partner's sake, then let's start the self-awareness and the healing process through therapy or otherwise, so that you don't do it. You don't just stay static in that situation. I'll also say I don't fault people for not knowing this or not considering it, because it's not talked about enough in our society. And access to mental health care and good therapists that work on these kinds of issues are hard to find and might be too expensive. So it's a hard situation.
What good would I have done to like drop something like that on somebody and they're trying to start their life and their career?
You would have made yourself be an honest person. You cheating on somebody, you being dishonest is about you, it's not about him. And I think he would have wanted to know about it.
Yeah, hard to know. Maybe he wouldn't, but we also don't know the circumstances of what she's talking about. Was it cheating over 6 months, or was it one incident? I mean, it's still cheating, but I don't know. I think it changes things. I feel like she didn't say anything along those lines.
Okay.
I cheated in a relationship, right? When I did cheat, it was when I was 18 years old and only kissed somebody else. So it's a little bit different.
I don't like the way this is going with him. The tone he has is judgmental and fatherly or superior. So I don't like the tone that he's having right now. It's starting to sound like he's looking down on her or something and ridiculing her in a way. The way he's like, and I was 18. It was only kissing. I mean, my God, it's not as bad as what you did. He didn't say that, but it kind of comes across that way. And that's also not good, and also a red flag.
I would never do that to somebody else. And I think if I did, like, I had the type of conscience where I would have to tell that person about it.
Okay.
Yeah. And to say it like that, essentially saying, you don't have a conscience, and I do. That's not, I want to be clear, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying she doesn't have a conscience. I hope in all the yammerings I've been saying about this, I hope that that's clear. There's a lot of roads to making those kinds of self-justifications, especially in this. But also, there's a chance she's not self-justifying. She might actually be only avoiding the self-hatred that she feels about herself, which is a whole other thing, right? Uche should be able to hear that. And he's really focusing on, did you tell him? And that is a part of the picture. But again, we don't know if he would have wanted to be told. I've had clients who will tell me that they were told about, the boyfriend who's not here, say he came into therapy. I've had people that will say, I wish you wouldn't have told me, for various different reasons. So I'm not saying that's an excuse not to say. I'm just saying it's complicated. But point is that he heard her say that she was guilty for a long time and she hated herself about it. And you'd think that would register to him on some level, and would, because that's what when I heard that, I was like, oh, okay. So, yeah.
I wouldn't put myself in that situation again. It would just be a no, I'm not.
How much longer were you with him after you cheated on him?
3 months.
3 months.
Yeah, that's a good question. That's in my head. I thought it would just be a week or something, but yeah, 3 months. I mean, it depends on what this 3 months was like. If she's like, well, I felt horrible and I said I was never going to do that again, and I was just racked with guilt, and I continued to try to work on the relationship, and then we broke up. Or, well, I didn't want to be alone, and I just didn't think about it, and then he broke up. There's a lot of different stories, so maybe she'll elaborate.
And did you sleep with that guy another time?
It was just once. Literally just once.
Okay, so a little bit more detail. It's interesting that he's asking all these questions, because often on these shows they don't either ask or show the asking, and she's answering. So, I don't know, maybe they'll survive this as a couple. they really do like each other, so maybe they'll get through this.
That was my first and only time ever doing that in a relationship.
In your entire life?
In my entire life, literally. I'm human, like I have my needs too. And I'm not saying that like it was selfish, but I have my needs too.
But then I hear that and I think, yeah, and absolutely, 100%. And then you break up.
And I'm supposed to just stay with somebody? No,
you're
I should have ended the relationship.
To break up.
It's hard. It is. It's hard. But, that's the protocol. That's what you do. It happens all the time. There's a lot of people who go, my needs aren't being met sexually or whatever. And I deserve to have my needs met. And I'm even starting to think I might be attracted to this other person. I better break up. People do that every day. Now, I wonder, though, about what she has been through that could have affected her decision-making in that situation. She mentioned two things, self-hatred, and also I was worried about being alone, is what she said. Those don't come out of nowhere. Those two issues don't come out of nowhere. And we might have a lot of sympathy for that, absolutely.
With that person.
I should
That's
have.
the honest
yes.
thing to do. Just break up with that person.
And I would do that now.
Okay, great. At least for my tastes, she's saying a lot of things that could have been said right off the bat. Yeah, I've learned from that, and now I would do that. I would break up right away because I've learned from the past. But it's like it took a while to get there. It took a while mostly because I keep interrupting and yammering.
Thank you for being honest with me about that. Do you have more girlfriends or guy friends?
More girlfriends for sure. But I would never do that to you.
How do you know?
I'm not the same woman I was at that time, Uche.
No,
So please don't.
That's only 2 years ago, though.
I know, but
That's not,
2
that's
years
not a long
is
time
a long time.
No, it's really not, though.
The thing that would convince me if I was in his shoes are the things that I was yammering about earlier in terms of self-awareness and therapy and recognition of the factors that led up to the cheating and at least some game plan as to how to address those issues. Again, not so much about cheating, but just about taking responsibility in general. There's a lot of scenarios that don't involve infidelity that unless she addresses these issues, there's a chance of repetition of the themes.
Okay.
And I also want to be clear, there's a high chance that he also has a whole set of issues and behaviors in his past that he should. She's just putting it on display, and she's brave enough and has enough integrity to talk about it. She could have avoided this. She could have just not talked about it. So that's a lot of honesty right there. And she's just offering up the information for me to talk about. He's not, and I'm guessing if we looked into all the cast members, there would be something along these lines. She's not abnormal or worse than the other people because she's just offering up material for us to scrutinize.
Aaliyah, you didn't have to tell me about that, but you chose to tell me about it. And I think that's a good thing. Aaliyah?
Yeah. Yeah. I guess the way to frame this is that they're dating and they're feeling each other out, trying to figure out if the other is a good partner. And, there's a number of boxes, and some of the boxes were checked for Uche, and he had another box to investigate. And he found out maybe that box isn't checked. And so, that happens. It would have been less difficult for everybody, including us, if it had happened earlier. But, that happens. Maybe for Uche, he's just like, yeah, there's so many things there, but that was a red flag, and I just don't want to deal with that. So that's that. Or she could say the same thing, that I really did like him, but the way he talked to me, I didn't appreciate the way he was kind of talking down to me about that. I understand where he's coming from, but I don't like his attitude. So, I guess we'll find out. And I don't know. I'm sort of hoping that they'll be able to see through this because they did seem like a good couple. And I do imagine, given everything that was said, that on the scale of things, Aaliyah does not have a lot of red flags. I think there's a lot more detail to her process about the cheating and the self-hatred, as she put it, and that is a lot more redeeming for her. She just didn't want to or didn't know what to say in the beginning of her talking about it, but I believe in Aaliyah, I guess, is my point. All right, well, that is it for that episode. I want to give a shout out to those people who sent in cards and packages for the 15th anniversary show that Umberto and I did a couple weeks ago in September of 2023, if you're watching this in the future. And these cards and the fan art was it's just so great. I don't know why I love it so much. I mean, it kind of makes sense, but I really do. We have Tercapio is her artist name, but her actual name is Teresa. She's from Czechia, I believe, and she made some really great drawings of me and Stacy and Umberto, and I love all of her art. Kate from Sweden sent some drawings of Stacy and of me with a phrase that says, "My dogs are barking," and really great depictions, especially Stacy. It's a very, very great sketch. Good old Soft Noodles sent in some comic book pages that she had made that are of her interacting sort of with me and with Bob and with Rebecca and with Umberto. And she really captured us very well, is what I'll say. It was really great. Also, a lot of people sent in cards and other kinds of well wishes. Christina and John from Chicago, good old T-Sky, Caitlin, Dej from Olympia, Eliza from Oregon, Karina from Okanagan, Canada. Thank you so much. And really to everyone who watched the 15th with us, the 15th 15-hour anniversary show. It was just a wonderful, wonderful time. I'm not lying to you that when Umberto and I stopped recording, we were euphoric. We were just like, oh my God, that was so much fun. It was so great meeting everybody. You know, it's one thing to yammer into a microphone and look into a camera. It's another thing to actually be interacting with people and getting cards and getting to know people. It's just a whole different thing, you know. So really, really great. And really to everyone, to the YouTube members, to the patrons, to you that's viewing this, it is just a huge honor for me. Honestly, I wake up in the morning and I just think I'm so lucky to have the career that I have and to be able to do this and to feel like I'm living my life's mission of trying to make the world a better place. I don't know if I am making the world a better place, but I'm trying, and you are giving me that ability, especially those who are patrons and YouTube members. You literally pay my bills and my family's bills for that matter. And thus I don't have to work at another job for 50 hours, 60 hours a week so that I, if you are a long-time listener to the podcast, you might remember, 10 years ago, I doubt any of you go back that far, but those episodes, back then I was full-time at the university and part-time private practice. And the episodes of this YouTube channel and the audio podcast were, fine, but not good. Because I only put out one episode every 2 weeks. At this point, I'm putting out, I think, 20 episodes a week-ish, something, 15-ish, depending on the week, 10 to 20. And I could only do that because of YouTube members and of patrons. And frankly, even for you YouTube folks who aren't YouTube members or patrons, just you watching these videos, I get a little bit of ad revenue from that, which also pays my bills. So anyway, it's just such an honor, and I just feel so lucky, and you are great. And take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really do.